So thank you all for being here. Thank you for all your patience. I'm very delighted to welcome our 4 alumni panelists today. And they will be speaking about their experiences transitioning from a PhD into consulting. So go down the line. So we have Sean Teller, who is a principal at Veris Engineering. We have Jeremy Lomax, an associate scientist at Exponent Incorporated. We have Sarah McGrath, a data analyst at EVT Associates, and Myra Rizzo-Lake, a field application scientist at Taconic Biosciences. So as a quick rundown of how this will go, we have 3 questions that we've prepared for each of the panelists, and after we've gone through all 3 questions, we'll open it up to a Q&A session with all of you, and then this will be followed by a networking lunch down the hall. So I guess we can just get started. So for the first question, can you all share with us your experience and motivations for transitioning from academia to consulting?
So when I finished academia in 2012, I knew I didn't want to be there. I wasn't happy kind of with the pace, the kind of problems I was working on. So I knew I wanted to go to industry. I actually, before consulting, I went to and worked for Intel, working in semiconductor manufacturing. But really, I wasn't interested kind of in the pace and what I perceived of as the politics in academia and what it would require to be a postdoc and a professor somewhere. And one of the things I really wasn't interested in doing was writing grants and asking for money, which is what I do every day now anyway. So that's come back to bite me. But those were kind of my concerns. I also really wanted to work on problems that are being solved right now, something that's a problem that we need to solve, but maybe in 10, 15 or longer years as you do in an academic setting. So those are my main drivers.
Very similar, where grad school for me was a good experience, but the politics and the amount of time that would have had to go into becoming a professor was not something I was interested in either. So literally, as he was speaking, I was like, yep, check that box. And so I tried something new, and consulting so far has been, I guess, closer to what I was looking for in terms of flexibility, in terms of just how much attention to a different project you have, whereas in academia, you are chasing things down to the most minute details. And even when you get there, there's additional steps that come after that. And of course, grant writing. It's just, I don't enjoy begging for money.
I got my PhD last summer, and then I was a Dean's Faculty Fellow here as a visiting assistant professor. So I had that one academic year of postdoctoral work. And during that year, I started the transition of wanting to do more research that was applied and created real action. I'm a climate scientist. We're in a climate crisis. I wanted to create action. And so I started looking at a diverse array of options after that year and found App Associates really aligned with my goals of creating that applied impact.
So I got my PhD in 2020. Actually, I defended a few weeks before the pandemic hit. So I got really lucky. I was still able to chat with my family and everybody here as I was defending. So that was really nice. And then I stayed a year for a postdoc in the same lab just to wrap up another project that I had started. And what drove me to get away from academia, just like everybody else, I do not enjoy writing grants. That's not, actually, I don't think I enjoy writing, period. I do not. But I have to tell you that I have to write now for my job, so same thing, it's just coming back to bite me. But I think academia is very focused in research and teaching. And moving to consulting really allowed me to experience a more diverse field. I'm exposed to so many different things, complex things. I get to work with all different areas, like therapeutic areas. And it's just a constant learning, and I really, really enjoy that.
So our second question is, how is your role different from what most people think of as traditional consulting, in other words, management consulting? Can you describe your specific role and its responsibilities, as well as some skills and technical knowledge specific to it?
Yes, so my answer may be a little different from others. I'm a little bit older than the other people on the panel. So, I've grown in my career in consulting over the last 8 years. So I'm a partner and a principal at my firm now that has additional leadership responsibilities for the firm as well as more revenue generation. One thing about the type of consulting I'm in is it's all about bringing money into the firm, bringing work for yourself and work for other people as well. And so I spent a lot of my time working on that and finding ways to do that. So that is something that's kind of grown at our firm. We start that on day one. We bring people in. Most people don't have experience with that, and we start to get them trained on what we call business development and thinking about that, because it takes, just like our technical skills, it takes years to become good at it and understand how to do it and have the instincts and drive to do that. And it's not for everybody. So some of that means writing proposals. My proposals are like 1 to 2 pages instead of a 15 to 30 page grant proposal that you write. We've got higher probability of success. So a lot of the skills that we need, that we look for and we're really interested in are communication. Being able to connect with people, talk to them about their problems, both the technical and non-technical people. Sometimes when we're doing projects, we're the most technical people in the room, and we have the deep expertise, and we need to explain it to, for example, a lawyer who's smart but does not understand mechanical engineering. Or sometimes it's someone who's a chemist has deep expertise there but doesn't have the mechanical engineering experience that I do. But sometimes I'm talking to people who are my peers in technical depth, and I need to be able to go into the weeds and the minutia. As far as technical skills, I do material testing and simulation. We do everything with like commercial products and codes because that's faster and cheaper for our clients. So having kind of the expertise in those methods that are industry used, but we try to apply them better than others can, because that's how we can bring in business and generate jobs.
So for me, still an associate, so I would say that most of my life and the skills that I need are very much project managerial skills, organizational skills, because while the principals are the ones that are going to be doing a lot of the talking with clients, sitting in the rooms with the lawyers, there's someone working behind the scenes that kind of gets all that done. So the report writing is where I spend most of my time. I kind of joke that I'm basically a science paralegal. Read a lot of depositions because my work is very focused on the litigation side of things, where my job is split up into proactive and reactive, where proactive is something before it goes to market. It needs someone to look at it, make sure it does what it says it's going to do. Can you say this about your product? Reactive side of things, when something goes wrong, was it the product's fault? How can we make those changes? Or was it the way that it's being used? So the reactive side of things, I'd say that the skill set that I need is far more keeping humans where they need to be, and just schedules and writing reports, making sure that when the principals and the testifiers go to talk to the legal side of things, the litigation side of things, they're aware of what's going on, and really just making sure that everyone else looks good. I am a support player in my role as an associate. Making slides very fast is probably the skill set that I'd say you will need in getting into the my particular type of life science consulting.
I'm a little bit different, being in data analytics. I'm a climate scientist in data analytics. So generally what I do is deal with really complex science and data and translate that into an action. Whether that be creating an automation that looks at data and inputs something that the client wants, or understanding complex problems and translating that into adaptation plans, research plans for the client so that we can reduce climate risk and vulnerabilities. ACT has a large range of what we do. I'm obviously in the climate side of things, but we work across climate, environment, public health, and beyond. Our mission is to improve the well-being of people everywhere, both their lives and economic well-beings. So we work across tribal, local governments, United States and beyond, internationally. So we deal with a lot of different clients and a lot of different really complex problems. And being in the position that I'm in, I work both on the data side of things, working like on discrete tasks to get that data done. But as somebody with a PhD, I work with junior staff as well as the project managers and directors in that kind of middle role to get projects running and rolling. So you wear a lot of different hats and you work on a large range of diverse projects.
So I am a field application scientist, and basically my role is to provide technical and scientific expertise that are related to the products that Taconic sells. So if you work with mice, Taconic sells live animals, so mice and rats for research. What I do is I do a lot of, you do really need to work on public speaking and communication skills, and also being open-minded about that you're going to be working with different therapeutic areas. So my role, of course, you'll never know everything, and when you think you know everything about a specific area, then it just hits you in the face with more knowledge. So I have to be constantly updating myself. So if I'm meeting a customer who's working on obesity, for instance, or diabetics, or whatever that might be, my role is to make sure that I'm up to date to what that customer is doing. Because everything is very project specific, right? So they could be working in the same company. I could be meeting with a group that's working on diabetes and a group that's working on oncology. So my role is basically keeping up to date with the science, making sure that I know which animal model would be, ideally the best suitable model for that specific research. I also have, so let's say something new comes up related to, oncology. So I'm responsible for taking that information, breaking it down, and putting it out. So I have to write that like in a scientific format, but also in a way that everybody, anyone in the audience could understand it. Like it goes back to what you said. You could be talking to a very smart lawyer, but they might not know anything about oncology. So it's just breaking that down. So that's also part of my role. And I agree with what you said. I also do wear a lot of hats. I do work with not just customers, but also with my internal teams. Like not everybody's a scientist, so I support salespeople. They're not scientists, so they need scientific knowledge to sell their product. So I am that person. So if they ever try to make a sell and they need to talk about that product, then I'm brought in to tell them, okay, this is the mouse model that would best work for your product. This is how it works. This is what you should do, you should not do. And we also provide support throughout their project. So I'm always checking in and make sure that the project is working as they expected. I think I would say that I'm a customer advocate too. So I educate them, but I'm also on their side. And my job is really to make sure that our product is working as best as possible for what they're trying to do. And I also have to be in the position where if I don't think if you don't have an ideal model, I always have to tell the customer that too. Like if you can go elsewhere, which is not also the best thing when you're working with salespeople, right? Because they're trying to make a sale, and as a scientist, you always want to make sure that you are standing your ground and staying true to the science. But I really, really do enjoy that, just because I just get to, you really do expand your skill set a lot. You learn about so many different areas. I think that sums up.
I think one thing I'd add that I meant to is that, because you brought up management consulting, everyone might be different. My type of consulting, a lot of management consultants spend a lot of time traveling, like all day, every week. They're somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're gold members on whoever they fly with, and they live out of a suitcase. I don't, which I prefer. I like to travel, but if you are that way and you want to have a family, those are big conflicts. I travel. I don't know what's normal anymore. We're still trying to figure out what the new normal is, but once a month would be a lot for me, kind of averaged out over a year, which I prefer. I don't want to be gone all the time.
And that's actually a great point. So with COVID, I don't know, although because I work with a company that sells live animals, it's hard. I don't even know how much of an in-person meeting we do. So I cover Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. But I really haven't had to go to New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut for anything. I live in Massachusetts. So most of my meetings are remote. So which I really enjoy, because you can have, so let's say if you have a customer in New Jersey, a customer in New York, and a customer in Massachusetts, if you were to have in-person meetings, that would be impossible to do it all in a day. Some days I have 5 customer calls and they are spread all over. So that's a great thing about that. So I can do the consulting. I work fully remote too, so that was great.
Yeah, clients don't want to pay for you to sit on a plane because you're not doing anything for them other than getting to them.
Exactly, yeah.
So I didn't send this question out, but like hearing all of you talk, kind of a follow-up question was, would you say that the skills and training you received during your PhD program were mostly useful, applicable to your jobs, or have you had to do a lot of like hands-on learning as you've gone through?
I'd say technical skills, yes. I think kind of the business development that I talked about, no. And communication, I think you get a little bit of it, but as a grad student, maybe you go to 1 to 2 conferences a year. You do 3 presentations a year. I give multiple presentations a day. So the level of experience there is just different. And so I think you kind of have those skills, but I don't think they're as strong as after doing the job for, even just a couple months, you really start to grow.
But I think grad school really presents you have to develop problem solving skills in grad school,
yeah.
right? And that comes really handy when you're doing consulting, because going back to what I said initially, you're going to be working with customers who do things completely outside. Like, so I was trained in molecular microbiology and immunology, focused on microbiome. Most of the customers that I talked to, they were doing oncology. What did I know about oncology when I first joined? Very minimal. Like, it was not my field of expertise. So, but I did have the problem. We acquired that in grad school, the problem solving skill, the ability to go to literature and interpret and have critical thinking about that, and then you can apply that. So I think that was good, but the business part of things, I think that'll come with as you do the job.
Yeah, just to echo that, it's the soft skills that I think are what really are being used on a day-to-day basis in consulting, where my dissertation focused on fish feeding, and now I study human injury biomechanics, because to me, biomechanics, physics is physics, and I was fortunate enough to have a background in medical anatomy. I taught at the Warren Alpert Medical School. But no, on the day-to-day basis, the things that I was trained to do in graduate school are not what I am doing in terms of technical work. For my brand of consulting, it's can you find answers in literature? Can you problem solve? What are you going to do when you need to look for a particular type of injury mechanism? Can you find that in the literature that's already out there? So yeah, all the things that I feel like we all take that for granted in graduate school, where it's like, this just comes with the territory. I'm a PhD student, so I need to know how to find a paper. I need to know how to even basic code. Like, these are things that we don't really think about on the day-to-day basis. We're more concerned with the very fine minutia, or I guess the finer resolution, I should say, not minutia, because it's all important. But yeah, definitely the soft skills are what are you going to be used on a day-to-day basis, more so than anything you're kind of really trying to hone your skills in currently.
For me, being a data analyst, I use a lot of the research skills that I use, just in a different way. Here, I was studying paleoclimate, understanding the Asian monsoon system over the last million years. Now I am looking more at relevant modern data that has different problems with it, but there are also very similar problems that my data here had, in that it's incomplete or it's complex. There's a lot of cleaning that you have to do in problem solving. So those skills that I use are just translated in a different way. So yes, for the data side of things, all those kind of technical skills, you use coding, looking at data, analyzing data, I use it on a day-to-day basis. I here was really heavily involved with the Sheridan side. I did all the certificate programs, and then I was a visiting professor. And so that communication skill that I learned through this center, and understanding how to communicate complex ideas to anyone, I think we've all said that in various ways, is really important. Getting to connect with people and connect with your clients to bring in business and make really successful relationships is really important. So those skills are probably the most important ones that I use.
So for our final question, what suggestions or advice might you have for students who are looking to prepare for a career in science and engineering consulting? That's your thought. however you want.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I will probably all say is work on soft skills, communication, non-technical skills, whatever you want to call them. That's really important, being able to talk to people on technical results and pivot, because it's a conversation with your client. That's one. The other is I wish I would have taken some classes in finance, business development, marketing, something like had some exposure to that other than knowing that those classes exist. You know, I did mechanical engineering, physics and applied math. Like that was all I did. I tried to get out of my general ed requirements because I like math and science, and I've regretted that ever since. But you know, as a grad student, you still have the opportunity to maybe take some of those things on in some classes. Even if you don't spend a lot of time doing it, kind of starting to think about it and starting to absorb it is very helpful. I think those are the big, and yeah, don't ever sell yourself short in your technical skills. Like Myron was saying, you learning how to quickly understand a problem, learn about what you need to, and then work on it is not something that the general public has. You know, we learn how to do that in our PhD, even though that's not the goal. So knowing that you can do that, I think, is very, very powerful. It gives you a lot of confidence.
Advice. Yeah, build your network. I'd say that informational interviews are going to be your best friend. I was talking yesterday about how when I was looking for work, I cold applied about 37 different jobs and got nothing back. And then when I started having conversations with people with no real ulterior motives or no like real designation, just more of, you are in a field that I'd like to be in, I'd like to know more about what you do. That's really how I started getting opportunities. Informational interviews are going to be the best way for you to find any kind of employment. Outside of that, what else would I say for someone looking into your question again?
Yeah, just advice.
Advice, general advice. Find a good support group. I'd say that, and I was talking to Mara yesterday, that her partner really helps her with a lot of things. My partner also helps me quite a bit. Unfortunately, the dog that you hear is my dog. We could not get our sitter to watch them for this weekend. And as someone who does travel quite a bit for their brand of consulting, just having a network of people that understand what you're going through, understand the requirements, the demands of your jobs are going to be very important, because things change from grad school to industry, and it's just a matter of trying to be as best prepared as you can. One thing that, or I guess two pieces of advice that I got from somebody who is actually in that PI level that I really consider a mentor was, first things first, everybody's in sales. Even as a grad student, you understand that you are in sales. You need to sell your dissertation work, you need to get your paper out there when you're writing grants, you need to get your paper out there when you're trying to publish. That's selling yourself. I consider myself to be in technical sales now. What I do is making sure that the client is happy with what I'm doing, and so that's me selling myself as a work product. My company likes getting PhDs because we are their product. To say, look at all these PhDs we have from all these great schools. That's what they're selling. Everybody's selling something. And then the second piece of advice that I got from my mentor was switch your thinking from why and what was me to how, because there's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a bunch of things that you're not necessarily prepared for, that you don't feel like you're prepared for, like you don't have the time to get prepared for. But once you acknowledge that you are in the current situation that you're in, you can start thinking about the how and do what we always do as PhDs and master's students, and just figure out, okay, well, what now? How do I solve this problem? How do I face this challenge? How do I figure out this answer, and then go from there? And if you spend less time on the why and the, I guess, commiserating and kind of stressing and focus on getting the actionable item done, it will make your life so much easier. Focus on the how.
I think my advice, especially in the search, is to identify what you like and what you want to do. Find companies that mission resonate with you, and identify like what they do, how they do it. Reach out to the network. Brown is a great network to get those informal interviews and really understand the diversity of options out there. There's so much out there, and finding your place is difficult, but it's so worthwhile once you identify what it is. And when you get there, be confident and network even within your organization. When you start a new position, those first few weeks, meet everybody you possibly can. Especially in consulting, things happen, things change quickly, and knowing who and where and what to go is so important. And letting people know you're there and you're willing to help and solve these really great problems is really worthwhile. So yeah, identify what you value, what you want to do, seek out those opportunities, be patient but be confident, and then always network, never stop networking.
I think you guys covered it all. I always like to focus, while in grad school, really focus on your problem solving skills. I think that's going to be critical, especially if consulting is something you want to go into, be open-minded. And be willing to accept that you might end up in a job that it really doesn't necessarily do what you did in grad school. So that's why it's so important to develop those other skills. Because if you know the technical skills, those you just learn as you're going through grad school. But then those other skills, problem solving, public speaking, communicating, all things like that. I think those are really valuable. Networking, I think that's key. Like Dale said, it's so important. And one thing that I always get told is that the life science community, even though it seems so big, we're a small community. Like at the end of the day, people will know everybody. So always, just don't burn any bridges. Always make sure that you, what's the way to put this out there? It's basically just it's a small community. Like everybody will, someone will know the other person. So you want to make sure that when you put yourself out there, that just be your best and be confident, be patient, and I think you guys covered it all.
Yeah, I have two things. One, your clients are people; they're not the companies you work for. So clients go somewhere and they can bring you with them, but that goes both ways. If you're a jerk to somebody and they go somewhere else, you're not going to get work with them.
Exactly.
So that is very important. You don't have to be, you don't have to be abused by people, but you can be polite and professional.
Respectful, yeah.
The other thing I'd add, and I forgot to add this, is that if you don't have work authorization, if you're an international student, that's okay, but it's something that you need to know. You need to know what needs to be done because some companies will help you do it, but a lot of time they don't understand the crunches that you're under. They don't understand the stress that it adds to your life. They don't understand the timeline. So being an advocate for yourself wherever you work, and knowing how much OPT you get, what's a good path for you on your background, is it H-1B, O-1B, E-1, E-2, all those kinds of things is something that you need to advocate for yourself and push timelines yourself, because it's your job, it's your livelihood. If you want to be here, you need some sort of work authorization. There are companies who will sponsor, but you need to be upfront. You need to be talking about that from the beginning and understand what the path is, what's on you, what's on the company, and you want to start early. Things never get faster in the government, and depending on government shutdowns, who's in office, timelines change, rules change. So be an advocate for yourself and know what you can do and what the company needs to do.
And that's all. So we can open it up to Q&A. So, any questions?
I was wondering how much initial training did you get coming out of your PhD versus, being expected to hit the ground running?
I got a lot of training. My first 3 months were just training. Before, and I shadowed a lot before I was able to take investment on my own. But I'm not sure how it is for everybody else.
Yo, I was dropped in the lion's den. Oh my gosh. On my first day, I had 3 projects that they expected me to have some kind of contribution to, and because we work billable hours, it was this double issue wherein they were like, figure this out based on previous methods, but because it's only supposed to take this long, we'll need you to take all the time it needs, but only bill those 2 hours, which means you're probably going to need to do more work in the rest of the week. Trial by fire. Definitely a trial by fire. I'd say that I've gotten a bit of a handle on it now. I'm about a year and 7 months in. But again, we were in the same event yesterday, and the way that her company operates versus the way that my company operates is almost night and day. And I'm just like, wow, those places exist. Like, oh, that's amazing. But you can do it. I'm still here.
You survived.
Yes, I have survived. I'd say that things are finally starting to balance out. But these are questions you should be asking in your interview, on your onboarding process. Because for me, I was like, oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to have plenty of time. Every job I've ever worked has always had like an extensive onboarding period. No, I was on cases day one. Yeah, which cool. A lot of responsibility. It's fun to see how like everything works behind the scenes, but. Whew! Yeah.
No, JJ, one thing that you brought up, like about questions to ask in an interview, just to build off that, always make sure that, like what he said, make sure that you set up, like make sure that you know the expectations, and ask questions that will give you the right answer. Like, okay, what are your expectations from me? Like, what's the training like? What is the management style? What is there room for growth? Those are the questions that you want to ask when you're going for an interview, because that's how you find out about the type of company that you're getting yourself into. Because I guarantee you, not everything is going to be posted on the job description. So those are the questions you want to ask during that interview.
If you can find people that had worked there before or who are currently working there open to connect with you before you commit to anything, that is a good way to do it. I found that in reaching out to people who are no longer with the company, I got kind of both sides of the coin, but also always take things that people say with a grain of salt. Their experience is going to be different from yours. Their personality is going to be different from yours, but valuable information in talking to people that are no longer with the organization or who have been with the organization for quite some time but are still at a kind of more entry level. So like associates, senior associates, I guess would be the way that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that, you know, if you have any say, if they ask you anything in your interview, ask to meet with those type of people. We try to do that in our company. We basically say, here are people like that are, you know, they've been here for a year, 2 years, whatever, kind of started at a similar vein. You guys can sit in a room, you can badmouth us, you can tell the truth, you know, whatever. Because we want people to want to work there. The worst thing is hiring somebody and then figuring out it's not a fit either way, because both of us have wasted our time. Nobody's happy at the end of it. So, but I think that's a great point. Is ask the questions, learn the expectations, try to get, you know, not from your manager. Your manager's not going to say, "Oh, I'm a bad manager. I treat you like crap." So yeah, trying to get that information.
For me, when we're hiring because there's a direct need, and there's usually a direct projects we want you to work on immediately. But we do have a very equity-based and trust-based onboarding process that gets you up to speed efficiently. Say it that way. And you have your buddy and you have things in place to help you understand the system and make that transition. It is a transition going from academia anywhere. And so it's great to identify folks within the company who've made that transition, and so you know what to expect, before you start that week one running. So yeah, it's definitely ask those questions before you start. This is great advice.
What I did when I was applying for jobs, I had just a general list of questions that I wanted to ask, just to make sure that the company was a good fit, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not all about the money, because you could be making hundreds of thousands, but if you're not happy there, it's going to start showing your work, and it's just not a good place to be at. So it's always nice to find those things out before you get yourself into that.
I guess for science and engineering consulting, during the interview or hiring process, what's the amount of consideration of how much do you know how to work on a case versus your technical skills? Does that make sense?
That's a good question. If we're for me, if we're my business is a little different. We're like 90% industrial consulting, 10% legal work, as he was describing it. So we're more on industrial. So knowing the ins and outs of the legal system, if you're going to get involved with that, you'll kind of learn as you go, and we'll teach you as you go. So we put a lot of emphasis on understanding technical skills. When we do an interview, there's an hour-long seminar presentation where we ask you to go as, it's like your dissertation defense. You should be going technically deep, show lots of equations, graphs with hundreds of lines on it that make sense, all those kinds of things. And we depending on the person and what they are, we have a technical part of our interview where we give them a problem and put them in front of a computer and write some code, use a software program that they say they're proficient in, all those kinds of things. So we expect, and we don't expect people to have business development experience, legal experience. We'll try to train you up on that in our ad hoc, non-formal way that we learned. But we want people to know that they're going to have to do that and be willing to do it.
Similar interview process where my technical skills were definitely challenged. There was code to run through, problem sets not a problem set, but so much of just talking to someone who was very clearly trying to determine your technical acumen. I gave an hour-long presentation as well where they said you should basically present this as if you were talking to somebody in your field, so very in-depth, and the questions I felt were very pointed when it came time for the Q&A at the end of it. In terms of working a case, I was very forward in my interview and told them that I had no background in the reactive litigation side of things, and I think that's easier to train. So I would not see it as a negative to not have that experience, but I think it's again going to depend on where you're going to work. Where for my specific organization, we knew that there was going to be a need for me to have that legal experience or to work on those side of things, but I'm assuming they figured they could train that, and it's the technical side of things they were more interested in.
Yeah, it's all about communication and how you translate your technical skills, during the interview process. It really depends on the job description of, if you're doing a job description that's more based on litigation or more based on, client projects. We work across those lines of that. And so it's learning how to communicate and sell yourself to that job description. It's hopefully and usually that job description matches the role you're going to go for. And so being aware of that and aware of what the company does and the clients we reach out to and the types of projects we've highlighted on our highlight reel on our website matters.
And my interview process was fairly long, not that long, but I think I'm almost positive to try to see if we could do some critical thinking. Basically, I had a formal interview with someone first, and then if that went well, then we have to do a presentation. It has to be an hour long where you present. I had to present a 40-minute presentation and 20 minutes for Q&A, and there were multiple people across the company that attended, and they were asking questions. And I just have to choose a therapeutic area that I wanted to. And ideally, they asked that I included some of the products that they sell in my presentation, so I had to do that. And then just present, and they had questions. And some of the questions they had, I didn't know the answer, and they wanted to make sure that they were able to say, I don't know, I'll look it up and get back to you, as opposed to try to make something up. So it's, if you don't know something, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, but I can look it up and get back to you. That's actually that's better than trying to fake it until you make it. But I think for my specific position, I think they were just seeing, can you do critical thinking? Can you do a presentation? Are you able to address the questions properly? And when you don't know something, how do you respond to that? Because it's also like you don't want to give a customer an answer that's not correct or it's misleading, things like that. So I think they were testing all those things. And then after that, I just had a final interview.
If I may, I think that's just good advice for your dissertation as well.
Oh.
I found that in my defense that was basically where they were trying to push me to get to the point where I said, I did not know, but I knew where to look or I knew where I could get started. And that's when I felt like the questions kind of eased off, because it was like, point it. And I was like, oh, I got that. I had to think about that. But then eventually I was like, how would I know that? I don't know, after you've been in that room for, however long that just blew by, you start to realize that they're really just trying to have a conversation with you. So if there's one thing you take away from graduate school, it's being comfortable with saying, I don't know, but that not being a negative thing.
It's never a negative thing, right? Because we don't know everything. No, you think you know everything about what you're studying right now, and we get so focused. I got so focused. I thought the entire world was vitamin A and bacteria. I swear. I was like, is there anything else outside of science? Oh my God, there is. And there's nothing wrong. Like when even now, like when I have customer calls, they'll ask me a question. I said, I don't know the answer to that. Sometimes I can make an educated guess, like, oh, if I had to guess, I would guess this, but let me go back and check because I'm not entirely sure.
Don't quote me on that. That's my favorite phrase. It's
Exactly.
I will think about this, but do not quote me on that.
Yeah, but please don't ever feel like saying you don't know something is going to make it look stupid or dumb or useless or not worthy, because it's not. It's actually, it's just, okay, I can easily look that up and get back to you. I'll find out and get back to you. And just follow through with your word, and then, like, within 24 hours, I just get back to the customer. Hey, I looked this up. I talked to my team. Here's the answer, and they are so thankful. And the same thing to this dissertation. That was a great point.
I'll add to that. On top of having that knowledge and being able to say when you don't know, having a growth mindset and showing that you're willing to grow and willing to learn, and that you've proactively done that throughout your whole PhD process. We all learn new things, all learn new skills, all self-taught things. That's extremely valuable to be able to grow. And just demonstrating that throughout your time in the interview process is really valuable and translates well.
Any other questions?
It's more like a rumor, but I've heard like some professors in they also do consulting jobs. So I'm wondering how, is it true, or have you ever encountered such situations, or like are those professors more like a competitor to a company, or is it like a collaborator that is actually consulting for a consulting company? How does it work now?
I mean, it can be both ways in legal cases against people who are professors at universities, and this is a side business for them. My company is currently trying to work with somebody who is a professor somewhere. It's to get into a new field, so he wants to do something a little more applied than academic research, make a little extra money. We want to get into there, but we don't have those skills, and they're complementary, so we're trying to work with them. So I've seen it both ways. I don't know the pros and cons of it. To me, it seems like running an academic lab yourself and then trying to like have another business for a day or two a week seems very tiring. But to each their own.
It's very common in my field where either a co-defendant or someone on the other side of the, the courtroom. I never really thought about that, but in my mind, the computer will be specifically related or attached to an academic institute. I work a lot with child safety products because that's just something that I thoroughly enjoy, making sure that there are things that are being put on the market that are safe and tested and really rigorously held up to standards. I thoroughly enjoy that. We constantly have to not go up against, but we see the same academic labs come up in our work and our research in some of the, what do they call it? Discovery that is brought up. So very familiar with some people who are very much entrenched in academia. So you see it, I wouldn't consider it competition. At the end of the day, at least in that field, we all want the same thing. We want safe products to be put out for infants and toddlers. That's what I see. So it does happen a lot in my field, life science consulting, specifically on the litigation side of things, because I don't know who's doing better research than academics. And we have time to think about things like that, and really think about things like that. Whereas in the industry side of things, there is always going to be an engineering process that is gone through where they're double checking, they're making sure they're doing failure analysis and proper, I don't know the correct terminology for it, but they have their own process of making sure that things are going to be considered in terms of what could be a risk potential or failure potential. So yeah, it's to circle all the way back to your first question, academics pop up all the time. I don't see it as a contentious thing or a negative thing or competition. It's just we're both trying to make sure that the best data is available to our clients.
Yeah, we often collaborate with academics, current professors. We often hire current professors. I forgot the percentage, but it's close to half PhDs at ACT. And so we're often working alongside academics. Just depends on the project, depends on the client, depends how projects are structured, whether we bring academic consultants on during the proposal side of things, or rather once we win award, we bring them in then. It varies across projects, but yeah, we do work with academics.
And my job, we actually have, it's listed on the website for everybody to see, but we have scientific advisors and all of them are academics. And that's a great tool, right? Because at the end of the day, academics work with live animals. We want their feedback, like, do you think this would be valuable for the research community in general? So I'm not sure, they're called scientific advisors, so it's similar to a consultant. But yeah, so we do work a lot with academics.
So I would imagine for your first job, you kind of, it may not be the perfect job, but it's something you need to kind of get your foot in the door. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you think about, like, your ideal position, or kind of like where you want to end up versus like, or what you thought you might get versus like, you've been looking for a while maybe, and you sent out a lot of emails and talked to a lot of people, and you ended up at a position, but is it kind of like this is exactly what you wanted, or it's like, you have like kind of mixed satisfaction with your kind of first position?
I don't know about you guys, but this is my second job since I left Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So I left Brown in 2021. So my first job was, I was a senior scientist, not on the bench. I was from home. I had to go in maybe once a week. I did not enjoy it. There was no room for growth. I was doing the same things over and over. I was just like designing the experiment, sending to the lab would do the work, send me the data, I would analyze it, present it to like internally or externally to customers depending on like whose project that was. I did not enjoy that at all. I didn't see any room for growth. I wasn't really direct with customers as much as I would have liked. Did not like it at all. But it did take some, but for me it was convenient at the time. That's why I took it, because I didn't want to move. So like my husband works 20 minutes from my house. I built a house, so it's like I'm pretty settled. I have little kids, so for me I was like, yeah, this is fine for now. But then I was like, now I have to find the perfect job, and I was in a mission to find the perfect job. And for me, I wanted some sort of flexibility because, again, 2 kids. Ideally, I would want it to be remote. The pay is also important, right? And then, is it going to be challenging? What is there room for growth? What am I looking at here, right? Because where I was previously, I did not see myself moving up. And I need to have that vision, right? I need to see what the next big thing is. And for me, I would love to grow within my company because I love what I do. So for me right now, I think I'm in the dream job type of, if you would call. But it's not my first job. My first job, it's exactly what you said. It's like I'm trying to get my foot to the level because it's so hard leaving academia to go into industry. I don't know about you guys, but they want experience. But how do you get experience if you're not given the opportunity, right?
For an entry-level position, doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. So it was so hard. So I was happy with what I got. I was like, let me work my way up from here. I had a paper that was a senior scientist at a company. I had all these things that I was exposed to, put them all down on my resume, and that's how I got this other job. So it might take some time. I think it goes back to what you said, patience and knowing what you want. So your first job might not be what you want, but grab that and work towards what you want, and really polish your skills, and you have time to just be patient.
I've only been out of academia for 5 months. I joined DAP in June, so perhaps I'm a little bit naive in this, but I do consider myself lucky in that I've really landed in a position that is really fulfilling, worthwhile, and does everything I wanted to do. That being said, it's not luck, it's hard work. I identified what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to be in the greater Boston area, and having an opportunity to be remote in a very flexible company where I can work the hours when I want to work it. There are goals you have to hit each week. There are things you learn. It's definitely a transition. The first 3 months are never easy, no matter what you're transitioning to, because it's not what you're used to. So as long as you have an open mindset and identify who you are and what you want to be doing and work towards that, it takes time, but you get there. For me, being patient is the hardest thing for me to practice. I'm used to things being fast, emails being answered quickly. There's nothing fast about the hiring process. We expect it to be faster than academic, which takes a full academic year. Hiring process in non-academic situations could often still take a full academic year. So being patient with yourself, but also with the company, and knowing that things are happening behind closed doors that you're not aware of, and that's okay. Being okay with not knowing the full picture before you enter is key. But being flexible both with yourself and with the company, giving yourself grace. It's one of the hardest things to practice because we're often our toughest critiques. But when you do that, you start to be able to really enjoy what you do as long as you've identified that.
I mean, I think that's all good. One thing I'd add is that this was my second job. I was not in consulting before, and I liked that job at first. After 3 years, I kind of looked at it and said, if I stay in this job forever, I'm going to repeat the last 3 years for the next 25 years of my career, whatever it is. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That was one reason I left. Personal reasons as well. I wanted to come back to the East Coast to be with my partner. So second job, I'm really happy where I am. But I think the other thing is, I know I didn't want to be in academia. I had reasons. I went to industry. I learned a lot about industry myself, and even then, what I wanted changed. So I'd say, take a job, get some industrial experience. Don't do something that you're going to hate, but your first job may not be ideal, but use it to get the skills, get industrial relevant skills, and learn more about what you want and use that to network for your next one. And realizing that you're going to change, and what you want will change.
For me, no, this is not my dream job. It is a good learning opportunity for me to find out the things that I do like, because like everyone's been saying, once you know what you want, it makes things a bit easier to try and get to where you want to be. My experience was one, of course it's not luck, it's hard work, but sometimes the cards that you are dealt do not allow you to take the time that you need to be patient, and so you have to think about the how. I finished my degree. My professor would have let me stay and kind of work as a postdoc. There was another individual who wanted me to postdoc for them out in Seattle. Those things were not interesting to me. I would have been making basically what I was making in grad school after taxes. Living in Seattle, probably less if you really thought about the cost of living. And so I was faced with a very real problem. How do I take care of myself? I don't really have a place to go back to, anything to fall on. I was the primary breadwinner in my relationship. And so I had to make some very difficult decisions. So I got a job that could pay for the things I needed to pay for, that could put me in a space that I needed to be in. We are doing better now, but no, I would not say that I love my first job. I like the experience that it's given me. I think that in a different time period, what I'm doing right now would have opened up so many doors. But we are all on LinkedIn. We all see what is happening in this job market. This is a tumultuous time in life science consulting and just life sciences and white collar jobs. It is what it is. So I say this because I would like to, if I was in the audience, this is what I would like to hear, what I consider the reality of the situation, in that sometimes you just have to grind. I think that goes without saying. We are all in these programs. We acknowledge that this is maybe not the most fun we ever had in life. Sometimes grad school is very fun. My experience was different than a lot of other people in graduate school, where things got a bit contentious at the end for me. But you do what you can, and just grace. Have grace with yourself. Be very kind to yourself. We are our harshest critics. But sometimes you bite the bullet, you do what you need to, but you're always thinking about where you'd like to be. And for me, I am actively working towards where I'd like to be, but I cannot say that as my first job outside of academia that this is my dream job. No, this is not my dream job. But I think that having been through much worse in my life, so much worse, this is this is very doable. This is a load that while I am not necessarily the happiest with, it is, it beats ramen noodles any day. So, there is always a silver lining. My thing is I try to stay positive as best I can. Sometimes I do admit to myself in the mirror, like, we're not fine today. But I don't know, every morning brings new opportunity. I wake up grateful most mornings, and, it's just another day to try and get it. Sometimes I go to sleep at like 6 p.m. I was like, this day just needs to be done. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question if there is another question.
I'm wondering, what are the biggest challenges, especially during the initial stages of your careers? Are they more about maybe learning quickly about the technical part of a field that we are not familiar with, or it's more about how to actually working on cases or projects, more about the business part of your job?
For me, I'd say it's the business part of the job. I think that the science that I'm doing now compared to the science I did in grad school is elementary. It's not the most difficult thing in the world. Sometimes you get something that gets you a little bit mentally challenged, but that's the exciting part. We all want to be challenged. We got into these fields because we like wrestling with tough questions and kind of overcoming issues and solving problems. But understanding how to work in an industry setting and figure out different people's styles, figure out how to stay on top of deadlines and very needy clients, that's where I'd say the learning comes in, because I'm a very blunt person, and so I have had to learn how to temper what I see as directness when speaking with, how do you coddle an adult, I've been asking you for this report, the deadline, for 3 months. You said I don't need it until January of the first quarter, and now suddenly it becomes an issue when you need it in a week, and you just have to roll with that punch. You can't be like, yo, bro, what's up, man? I told you that this was a priority for me. You kept pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back. I pushed back to ask you for this thing, but those are the things that I'd say were more difficult for me, because in an academic setting, we do a lot of the pushing ourselves. We push our advisors, we push our lab mates, we push for reagents. We always have ways that we can try and make sure that things are moving along as best we can. I worked with live animals too, so you can't really push them. You try, but no, I'd say that now that I'm on the other side of things, just trying to wrangle adults is what I personally have the hardest time. Not the hardest time, because I'm getting better at it, but that's what I felt was one of the more difficult things for me. And then also, life becomes far and way more difficult outside of grad school somehow, which I was not prepared for. But no, that business side of things, life outside of the job, those are the things that I think were the most difficult for me, especially in my first 6 months. Taxes are insane. When I got my first paycheck, I thought there was a mistake because I could not believe how much was being taken out in taxes. But the technical things, nah, if you're here, you got that. I firmly believe that. Whatever.
I agree with the technical. One thing, depending on what kind of mood I'm in, I like to say when we hire new PhDs is I either need to train the PhD out of them or beat the PhD out of them. Because as people who do our PhDs, as other people have said, you become so focused on one tiny little thing, right? And you know that so well, and you probably know that better than anybody else in the room, and that's great. But a client needs to make a decision in 3 weeks that they need to make, hundreds of thousands or $1 million decision, and they need an answer in 3 weeks. And there's this economic theory that a 20% effort gives you an 80% result. You probably want to be a little bit better than that, but you don't need to be the 100% scientific article in Science or Nature. That's not what they're paying you for, because that takes years. And a team, they need an answer in 3 weeks. So you need to kind of understand any assumptions you make, what impact that has. I don't want to use the word shortcuts, but if there's any issues, you kind of need to bound that and be like, maybe I could do this better given 2 months, but it's going to change the result 1%. Who cares? You communicate that to the client, but sometimes PhDs will just put their head down they're smarter, they're very smart, and they want to solve the problem themselves and solve it to a level that you don't need to. So knowing kind of when you've gotten a good enough answer, and also knowing when you can go to someone else to help, because it doesn't serve the client for you to work 80 hours and solve it, or I can go next door and ask him and he can give me an answer that helps me solve it in 1 hour. I've just saved ourselves and the client so much time. And I don't get any kudos. And I'm going to get punished for spending 80 hours when I could have had the answer very quickly.
In my first week, I was tasked with finding a ladder. And the first ladder I found was like, I think like $800. To me, that was like an insane amount of money for a ladder. And so I kept looking for a cheaper one. I was like, they're going to love this when I come with this full report of like, I found the most affordable ladder. That's exactly the ladder we need. It's the right model. I told the time. And then my supervisor would sit me down and be like, look, this is your billable rate. Based on the amount of time you put into finding this ladder, when you really ended up looking at how much you saved for us to find the more affordable ladder, it's about the same. Next time, just buy the $800 ladder. And I was like, oh, yes, you guys have money. That makes a lot of sense, which beat the PhD out of them. There's cash. There's a reason they're paying us this much. It's because they'd rather just spend the money than try and find a more frugal solution.
Being very efficient with your time. I work on billable hours, and so understanding that time limit is a time limit and you need to achieve all the goals within that time limit is the most important thing. Making sure you're staying on budget with projects or under budget, and getting the results, the level of excellence that everyone expects. So yes, being very efficient with your time is the most challenging part, because we're used to working by ourselves, working towards that decimal point of particularity. But when you're in a consulting setting, you're working towards a goal and you're working towards a time limit, and you want to hit a level of excellence within that. And you need to use a team in order to do that. So relying on your colleagues, working in team settings, managing that is all very important and is a huge transition.
For me, I'm salary, so I don't have the time crunch issue. But I think one of the biggest challenges is I really get to work with a lot of different people with different personalities. You do that in grad school too, but in industry, I don't know about you guys, it's a different environment, right? And I work with a lot of people in sales, and they don't have a scientific background, so to them, because they're commission based, they just want to sell the mics out. So the challenge here is trying to get them to understand a lot of times, you're trying to sell this to this customer, but this won't work. I know you're trying to do it, but they're going to buy it. It's going to fail. It's not going to work. It's trying to work with different people with different mentality. They have different goals than I do, right? I don't have a number to meet, like, of how many animals that we sell, right? I just have to make sure that people, like researchers who are purchasing these animals, they're using them properly. They know everything about that model and what they're used for and things like that. So it's just that mainly like working with people and helping them understand the system in general. Other than that, because it wasn't my first job, it just feels a lot easier than my first job. I think it's what you said. My first job wasn't my dream job, so I felt there were a lot of challenges there. But once I got out of that, things just felt easier. And I think my biggest challenge is like the day-to-day things. Like you meet with so many people. Like I'll have a virtual meeting with somebody who is very talkative and they're engaged, and some people just have to like drag a word out of them sometimes. It's like mostly me talking. So it's just knowing how to deal with those circumstances as best as you can, and still make sure you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish by the end of that meeting.
I think that's time. So thank you so much to all of our panelists, and we can kind of move that way to go get lunch.